Let's get an update now on the Newspoll, the political editor at The Australian, Simon Benson. Simon, we'll be talking to you every week of the campaign, which I'm looking forward to. The first poll, interesting move.
It's not the start that Peter Dutton would have liked, and I don't think it's the start they expected, although I think if anyone had been following the polls since the start of the year, there were some indications that it might get to this point. I think what will be frustrating for them is that at the end of last year, you remember the Coalition were at 40% primary vote and they were 51-49. I think there was probably a slight misinterpretation of where the Coalition were in the polls, that they were in a box seat to win the election. I don't think that was ever the case. The indicators were pointing their way and the momentum was with them. That momentum began to peel off them in February. So I don't know that these polls could be necessarily attributed to anything that's occurred in the last week, such as the campaign against Peter Dutton for opposing the tax cuts, various things like that. There's been a slow drift away from the Coalition. That primary vote's now down to 37. It's only 1.3% higher than it was at the last election. So there has been a drift away. Peter Dutton's own numbers have fallen more sharply than that. And I think that will be of concern to them. On the other hand, I wouldn't get too excited yet. If I was Anthony Albanese, their primary vote's still at 33%, which is pretty much in line with their election result last year. It's worth remembering that both leaders are still in negative territory. I mean, this is still a contest between who people consider the most or the least unattractive of two unappealing choices. So,
and off the back of a rolling cost of living crisis as well, where incumbents around the world have struggled.
This is true. This is true, and I think that the frustration within the Liberal Party will be why they haven't managed to capitalise on that more. They should have been in a better position than this heading into the campaign. But if a week in politics is a lifetime, then a campaign's an eternity, and anything can happen.
Oh, absolutely, anything can happen. I think it's we've discussed it that this is one of the most crucial campaigns, given how close things are, but how soft the vote looks as well.
That is true. The vote is still very soft, and campaign officials on both sides will tell you that. So I don't know how much we can read into that. With Newspoll, it's obviously reflective. It's not a predictor of what's going to happen. It's a reflection of what's been going on over the last 3 weeks in this case, and then if you look at the other ones over the last 3 months. But there's no doubt that as of January, Labor were in trouble. The Liberal primary vote was 8 points higher, and Anthony Albanese recorded his lowest ever approval rating at -21. Anthony Albanese is now at -9. It's Peter Dutton. He's switched or flipped that advantage he's had. Plus, that primary vote lead has also been cut in half.
So talk us through, yeah, indeed. So encouraging for the government, but not definitive in terms of where we are, because as you say, 5 weeks is an eternity. Can you give our viewers a sense of what the budget numbers, the reaction to the budget was, and how you see that alongside the improvement for Labor separately?
Yeah, look, there's an interesting explanation to this, I think, but just on the headline numbers. And I think Jim Chalmers is probably the victim of having held a budget they never thought they'd have to, because a lot of the big ticket items that would have been in that budget had already been rolled out. Medicare, women's health, even last year, HECS debt relief, a lot of those things. So clearly they had to cook up something to have in the budget, which were these meagre tax cuts. But and this is the great contradiction, I suppose, in these numbers, considering where they are in the polls and the fact that they've managed to now leap ahead of coalition two-party preferred vote, is that in terms of the number of people that think that this budget will be good for the economy, it's at its lowest point since we started asking this question in 1999. So it hasn't been a well-received budget at all. Only 16% of people think they'll be better off financially as a result of it. There's plenty of Labor voters in that camp as well. So it hasn't been well received at all. Beneath those numbers, though, and this is the problem, and it goes back to this point about the drift away from the coalition, is the fact that only 38% of voters believe that the coalition would have delivered a better budget. Now, historically, when you have a mood for change election, oppositions tend to do a lot better on that number. That is conspicuously absent for Peter Dutton, and I think it goes back to a bigger problem than just the negative campaign that is clearly working against Peter Dutton by the Labor camp, but the fact that they appear over the last couple of months to have, in a way, vacated the field on the most critical issue of this election, which is cost of living.